let's talk about metabolism. So we're not going to discuss about metabolism in greater detail, but we are going to talk about metabolism, those introductory parts, because this thing, metabolism, is really important part of all living organisms in planet Earth. Okay, we need to have energy, and metabolism means the management of energy. So that's why we need to learn this metabolism very well. So let's talk about this metabolism and how those living cells able to manage the energy flow from the sun, which is the big boss, or having all those energies towards the life forms. Okay, so this journey is done by these metabolic processes that are going on all the time in cells. So all these cells actually made up with several subunits and all those compositions that eventually leads to break down those food materials to make energy and to make use of that energy. So suppose we have this eukaryotic cell here, and we have different nutrients that's gonna be broken down. But in this case, there are pictures of capsules and these tablets. Those are not as much as nutrients, but we talk about nutrients. We're talking about different foods that we eat through the day long, and when you eat those foods are going to be digested, and after the digestion the food is absorbed. After the absorption, that food after all reaches to this unit of life, which are cells. So it reaches the cell through those cell membrane via those carrier proteins, and after it reaches the cell, several steps of processes is set place, and after all those processes we make energy out of that. So suppose this is the nutrients go into the cell, and after that we use those ATP. And why we need this ATP? Because this ATP is the energy currency of the cell, and this ATP helps for the growth of the cell, division of the cell, and the repair of any kind of damages that can be found in the cell. It helps those cells to be organized properly, and it also helps to maintain the functionality of the cell properly. Okay. So now let's summarize this whole chain. We eat food, those foods are broken down into small particles like nutrients. So we have food, that food is full of with carbohydrates, it's full of with proteins and say lipids, and those foods are chewed up, and we have those nutrients, for example amino acids and small polypeptides and all these things, and it is further broken down to different parts of food. So there are mainly three types of food that we eat normally is polysaccharides, which are the maximum part of our food that we eat. Then we have proteins, then we have fats. So all these type of foods are important for our body to function properly. And when we have these foods, which are the normally called the polymers of macromolecules, as we have discussed all the structures of those polymers and the function of those polymers, and these biomolecules or the organic compounds are further broken down via the steps called metabolic pathway. So from here on, the cell starts to make ATP with the energy which are stored in these organic compounds. Okay, for example, these fats, polysaccharides and proteins are broken down to a molecule called acetyl-CoA. It's a very important molecule during those metabolic processes that are going on in our cell, and the process called the glycolysis. So when all these nutrients or organic compounds go through glycolysis, it forms acetyl-CoA, and after the acetyl-CoA formation, another type of metabolic process occurs. The name of it is citric acid cycle. Another name of it is TCA cycle, or tricarboxylic acid cycle. So it's a mouthful of names, so you don't have to memorize those names, but you need to understand the basics of this metabolism. So what are they doing? They are helping those organic compounds to be broken down into these particles like carbon dioxide in this case, and NADH and FADH2. And what are these NADH and FADH2? These are those electron donors. So these are those electron donors which are eventually leads to form those ATP. Okay, so after the donation of those electrons from these things, So that means the oxidation. So whenever we are talking about this NADH and FADH2, you first thing that you have to memorize is oxidation. So what do we mean by oxidation? Oxidation means we losing of electron, and another thing which come near oxidation is called the reduction. And what do you mean by reduction? Reduction means the addition of electron or receiving of electron. So when we are talking about this NADH and FADH2, we are talking about oxidation, and by oxidizing the NADH and FADH2, we eventually make energy. And what are this energy? We have ATP molecules in our cell which are eventually serve as the energy molecules. Okay. So now, for example, the first of this metabolic system starts in the green plants. So those green plants which are having this type of special cells, and the cells contain green colored chloroplasts which are filled with a green colored color molecule which is called chlorophyll. And the special property of this chlorophyll is to be excited by the sunlight, to be excited by the particle comes from sunlight which is called photon, and those chlorophyll is triggered to be gone in a very excited state, and those excited state it trigger the further processes during this period, and it will eventually leads to form chemical molecule that have this energy of the sun. So it takes water from the outside and takes carbon dioxide from the outside of the cell. So this water and carbon dioxide are present in our environment, as we know they are very abundant, and the cell of plant take those things and they process and they form what is called a chlorophyll. Sorry, what is called a carbohydrate, what is called a food. In most of the cases they form this carbohydrates or this saccharides or this polysaccharides, and they can also modify those polysaccharides into other organic compounds, for example in this case fats and proteins too, but most of the time they use that to make polysaccharides, because the saccharides are very simple sugars, and when those saccharides or sugar molecules are attached together, they'll form a chain which is called a polysaccharide. Okay, so that's what the sun is doing. The sun is using giving the energy, this photon, and the cell uses that. It takes carbon dioxide and water and forms these molecules. And why they are forming these molecules? Because these molecules are having the energy which came first to the cell. Okay, so these molecules are very filled with those energies. So the very energetic molecules are produced during this period, which is called the photosynthesis. So the plants, those green plants, have the ability to make food out of this energy which is coming from the sun, and taking those carbon dioxide and water from the outside of the environment, or the outside the environment. And when they produce those foods, we take those foods, we means the animal which are not autotrophs. And what do you mean by autotroph? Autotrophic organisms are those which can produce foods on their own, like plants, like green plants. Most of the plants are autotrophs, but here it's a rabbit, and all those mammals and maximum animals are not autotrophs, they're heterotrophs. That means we depend upon an autotroph to be satisfied with the foods. So in this case rabbit eat the food, and after eating those food, the food goes under the stomach of the rabbit, and it is digested, and after the digestion absorption takes place, and then finally those food materials go to the individual cell of this rabbit, and then the action takes place. Now what we have here is a total system, an overall system of this metabolism and the energy flow. So it's actually about the energy in this case. So what do you mean by this energy flow in this process is, to talk about this further, I must describe these two terms. One is the catabolism, another is the anabolism. So what do you mean by catabolism? It's a simplified form of the name called degradation. So when you talk about catabolism, that means we are degrading those food materials. And when we talk about anabolism, we are synthesizing those macromolecules or food materials like carbohydrates, proteins, fats. So in this case, what is happening is so it's a combined process. What we are looking here is a combined process of this degradation and synthesis during this metabolism. So metabolism, in a sense, in this case, is a circular way of having something and then destroying something. So we are making something, we are destroying something, so we are creating a balance of this energy. And the energy, remember, comes from the sun. So in case of autotrophic organisms, or those organisms, we can use this light energy to make products like foods or those biopolymers. So in this case of trees which are green, which are having those chlorophylls, they use this light energy and they produce food. So though they need carbon dioxide and water for as their food, and they can produce these biopolymers. There is a process called anabolism, because we are synthesizing things, that is, it is called anabolism. So after all, the formation of biopolymers takes place, and after the formation of these biopolymers, which are eventually most of the time are carbohydrates and in many times proteins and lipids, this biopolymers is further taken and degraded by plants and animals, both to have those building blocks of life. So I have those building blocks, for example amino acids and glycerol, fatty acids, and all these important materials which can be taken easily by those cells. So in the case of these heterotrophs, they are using those foods, those are produced by trees, and they use those food, they degrade those foods as a process like catabolism, and they produces building blocks. And not only they are producing building blocks, but they also produce some waste materials after the digestion process is over. After this cycle, we are seeing this energy is produced. So when they degrade these biopolymers, energy is reduced, and when they are producing, when trees are producing or auxotrophs are producing these biopolymers via anabolism, they needs actually energy. Okay, so this is the energy in the middle center of this whole metabolic scheme, and we have anabolism and catabolism together. Okay, so we have seen this in case of heterotrophs, they produce energy by degrading those foods. Okay, now let's talk about the intermediary metabolism. So we have here the initial compound, this is A, this is abbreviated AI. I means the intermediate compound is the initial compound, and we have the final compound which is B. And to convert this compound from one to another compound, we need what is called an enzyme. So what are those enzymes? Enzymes are really important characters in the field of metabolism. Okay, they are the key players in this case. So normally enzymes are the protein molecules. Those protein molecules are folded together to give a proper function. They bind to a substrate and convert those substrate into a desired product by changing its conformation and by providing the suitable microenvironment to that substrate. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit detail. So it's the overall scheme of metabolism in heterotrophs. As we are looking at this, we have in this heterotrophic cell, range of organic compounds are coming in, and those compounds are broken down into small particles which are intermediate metabolites. Those intermediate metabolites are further catabolized and they form carbon dioxide and water, and this carbon dioxide is released from the cell, out of the cell, and some waste nitrogenous poisonous product is also delivered, and those things are also eluted from the cell, and these water molecules which are produced are used for cellular purposes, and some water molecules with those nitrogenous wastes are also be taken out of the cell. And in anabolism process, those intermediate molecules are also be taken, and they are taken. So here we have these organic compounds that are coming in from the outside the cell, and this all the type of reactions are going on. Catabolism is going on, and when we have these intermediary metabolite steps, then those organic compounds or complexes are there to make themselves or arrange themselves in such a way to form large molecules, because we eat protein, we eat lipid, we eat carbohydrates, and we are protein, lipid, and carbohydrates. So we have to eat them, but we can't take them directly like that. Our cells are really small to take all those macromolecules. That's why we have to take them, and we have to degrade them via catabolism. And then in an anabolism pathway, we can have this. So it's a linear arrangement of this metabolic pathway. We have discussed this. Is the branched pathway. This kind of branched pathway also can be formed, and we also have this branch diverging pathway. It's a converging pathway. So what do we mean by a converging pathway? You can look at this. All those substrate or different things are coming towards the point. So product is only one thing, and we have lots of different reactants there to actually have this product. So we call them convergent. So it's towards a particular point. And diverging pathway, we have a particular point, and we are going from those particular point towards a various amount of variation points. Okay, so various amounts of productive points. So that's why it is called the diverging branch pathway. And we can also have the cyclic pathway. An example of this cyclic pathway is TCA cycle, or citric acid cycle, which is the base of the carbohydrate metabolism in all the living cells, most importantly. And we can have the spiral pathway, which is not that much common in nature, but we can also find all this type of pathways. Now let's look at traits of metabolism. In this case, what we have ATP in the middle, which is adenosine triphosphate, which is an important molecule, which is the energy currency of cell. And why it is really important? Because it can be hydrolyzed, and ATP can be hydrolyzed into adenosine diphosphate and inorganic phosphate. And not only we can hydrolyze them, but the hydrolyzing of ATP is a really exergonic process, and it is very energy favoring reaction. So it leads to the formation of del G negative 7.3 kilocalorie per mole, and that's why this reaction can couple with other endergonic reactions, and this helps to occur those endergonic reactions in the forward direction. So what we have here in this case, we can have this anabolism pathways in this case. So ATP helps for different work purposes, and we can form ATP via adding those adenosine diphosphate and inorganic phosphate. As we know, in all this case of metabolism, we are talking about the ATP management or the energy management. In this case, we have this ATP form, and we have the hydrolyzed ATP plus inorganic phosphate form. So we can arrange these things to make ATP via the process called anabolism. In all this case, we are using oxygen. We are oxidizing different molecules like NADH and FADH2, which are the energy molecules which can be derived by those metabolic pathways of carbohydrates and proteins, and we can degrade them and form this carbon dioxide and water, and we can release them. That's why we are doing all the time. And we can make use of ATP again. This is a synthetic pathway. So suppose in this case, in this case, in case of catabolism, we can use in all this case, but in case of anabolism, we use this ATP in the synthetic pathways. Why in this case of anabolism we need to arrange things? So we need energy to do that, because all these anabolic pathways are energy crazy or energy dependent pathway. They need energy. They are endergonic. That's why they need energy, and the energy is supplied by this ATP. So this ATP is used for making concentration works, for example transport, electrical work for transporting different things, and mechanical works as well. For example, this mechanical work, we can say the work of the motor protein through the microtubule systems. Okay. So this is the three traits of metabolism. You can see this is a forward reaction, this is a reverse reaction. So we have a forward reaction which towards the product, and we have a backward reaction. In this case, we are going towards the substrate. These two types of reaction are really important, because this two type of reaction gives the cell the control over its metabolic pathways. And remember, these enzymes for a particular reaction could be same in the reverse reactions many times, and they can be varied. Okay. So here they are going all the time like one direction to other direction, but the enzymes are here. For example, A to B is an enzyme A, but again B to A would not. It can be an enzyme 1 or it cannot be an enzyme 1. Okay. So what we are talking about actually is this. So we have a reactant over here. It is A. We have the product B to C. In this, we have intermediate B, and we have the product C. So C is in a much lower energy plane. A is in much higher energy plane. So if we want this reaction to occur, this reaction will occur spontaneously, because it is from higher energy state to the lower energy states. That's why it will occur really fast, and it will really occur fast. And the backward reaction will be stopped, because the backward reaction is not favorable in this case, because the energy states will be from in backward reaction from lower state to the higher state, and that is energy driving process. So without any energy coupling state, this process will not occur. Okay. Now normally in case of cells, what we are doing, we are always spontaneously adding some substrate materials and we are eluting those product materials, thus maintaining those state of energy in these variable portions. So you also have this reactants in the higher energy states, and we are having those products in the lower energy states, and thus what we are doing, we are actually maintaining the balance to keep the reaction going on all the time. And why a reaction is going on in the forward direction? It is going on in the forward direction because all these equations are, all these reactions are want to be stay in the equilibrium phase. So because they are really satisfied when they can go into the equilibrium phase, and they can only go into the equilibrium phase through this energy barrier. Okay. And what we are doing, we are creating those barriers throughout the time to make the reaction happening all the time. Okay, but many times we need to stop the reaction. And how we can stop the reaction? In this case, we are seeing that when the product assimilation is really higher, for example in this case, when the product assimilation in this bucket is really high, in this case the water level, then the process will stop. So it's an auto switch functioning is going on in our cells, and this auto switch function is really important, because we don't want those products to be formed again and again which are already present in higher amount in our cells. Okay. So for example in this case, the brain uses primarily the glucose, and the liver can use various kinds of fluids, and these are the places where different metabolic pathways are going on. Examples of each and end of the spectrum are the brain and the liver, because these are the very important states of metabolic side. Those are so we don't have various specialized organs, but this liver is the most important organ in this whole metabolic system. And there are many controlling regions like pancreas, which actually controls the whole metabolic system by secreting some hormones, and this brain, because brain has this pituitary gland here, which also secretes some hormones, which is gonna in turn helps for these metabolic purposes and controls these metabolic purposes. And we can have all these different kinds of muscle cells where we can find different reactions going on, and the production of ATP is going on all the time. So there are different specialized organs there where the metabolism process is going on all the time. Okay, so here is a question. I can forward this. No, what is the question? Question is, which of the following does not describe the metabolism? The reverse direction of metabolic pathway occurs at a different rate from the forward direction. The metabolic pathways can be turned off when the level of product is too high. It is also true some cells types completely lack metabolic pathways that other cells type utilize. The last step of metabolic pathway regulates the flow rate through the entire pathway. So this is the answer. Now in this case, which of the following is not a molecule used by cells? So we escape this, going to the major metabolic reactions. Now this is important. I am going to tell you the 6 major metabolic reactions which you have to really understand very well, because when you're talking about metabolism, when we will discuss about metabolism in greater detail, you can find these reactions come again and again. First reaction will be the oxidation reduction reaction. So what is an oxidation reduction reaction? In this case, we have in this oxidation reduction, what is oxidation? Oxidation means losing electron, and reduction means gaining electron. So somebody has to lose an electron. In this case, H2 will lose an electron, and this B will accept an electron, and that's what is going on. And an enzyme called oxidoreductase which are doing all these things. So if we look at this structure, so in this type of oxidation reduction, what we have hydroxyl, then we have aldehyde, then you have the acid. So remember this configuration in case of oxidation reduction, because you are going to find this more and more many times in your life, that here we have this in this case the hydroxyl, then you can find aldehyde, then the acidic group you can find. Okay, so if you look at this, it will look like this. Now let's talk about the group transfer. Okay, so let's talk about the group transfer. We have this. So let's go here. Let's talk about the group transfer. So what is a group transfer reaction? In this case, Group transfer means we have different prosthetic groups, not only prosthetic groups, we have different chemical groups, sorry, we have different chemical groups that has to be added to a particular molecule that can be deleted from a molecule, and this addition or deletion leaves a significant effect in that molecule. In this case, many times you can find the addition or deletion of this phosphate group. We have seen an example before that the deletion of phosphate from an ATP drives on formation of a reaction which is really favorable in the forward direction, that helps other endergonic reaction to occur by coupling this reaction with all those types of reactions. Okay, for example, you have the alpha glucose and you can form the alpha glucose 6 phosphate. This is a very common reaction. We can have this hydrolysis reactions. What do we mean by hydrolysis? Hydrolysis means by the addition of water you can break those bonds. Remember, we have talked about hydrolysis and dehydration reactions in when you discuss the macromolecules, because the formation of macromolecules are important to add water, but the hydrolysis in this case is important to break down those macromolecules into smaller parts. For example, we have the triacylglycerol. When the water comes in, and we can divide this into 2-3 triacylglycerol and 1 fatty acid molecule. If we add more water molecules, we can break these bonds between this glycerol chain and fatty acid. You can eventually form fatty acids and glycerol backbone. And if you want to make those bonds, we have to delete those water molecules. We have to dehydrate the situation. Now we can also have the non-hydrolytic cleavage. So what do you mean by non-hydrolytic cleavage? In the previous step we can see this cleavage by this water molecule, but in this case we can also have cleavage by the help of other molecule. In this case, the aldolase, for example. What is this aldolase? In this example, a very good example will be lyase. So what lyase is going to do, lyase is going to work as a molecular scissor, and that's eventually going to cut ring or circular molecule into smaller pieces. For example, we have glucose, and if we add lyase to glucose, it will be divided into different carbon dioxide groups. And if we have enolase, for example, in this previous case, it can be divided and the formation of water is released. So this kind of thing you can also see in the view of the field of metabolism all the time. Okay, so this kind of liaison or this kind of deletion don't need water. That's why they are called non-hydrolytic cleavages. Now we can also have isomerization or rearrangement reaction. Isomerization means to rearrange those groups in between them. In this case, we have this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, which is an aldose. So we can transfer this aldose into a ketose by switching or swapping these groups. This keto group in the second carbon position and the hydroxyl group in the first carbon position. If we do this, what we are forming, we are actually forming this dihydroxyacetone phosphate or DHAP or DAP, which is a ketose. So we are converting aldose. We are converting aldose towards the ketose with the help of this isomerase. So it's a molecular rearrangement. It don't deal with other kind of deletion or addition. So it's only a simple rearrangement. Now we can finally have the bond formation reaction. So bond can form throughout the time because carbons, oxygens, carbon hydrogens are really bond crazy, carbon oxygens are bond crazy. So all these things can attach together. They can attach together to make bonds between themselves. In this case we have different carbons. So if these carbon molecules attach together, we have carbon-carbon chain. We can form the hydrocarbon chain, for example. So we have pyruvate. From pyruvate we can form oxaloacetate. So pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. We have attached carbon dioxide, and we can finally have oxaloacetate, which is a 4-carbon molecule. And we also have this acetyl CoA and oxaloacetate, and we finally form acetyl CoA. It's a citric synthesis, an enzyme in these cases. So all this type of reaction we are forming bonds between one another, because as we know, chemical bonds can be formed because all those molecules, they want to be stable, and they can be if they want to be stabilized, they can form bonds with themselves to make things really stabilized in all these cases. So this, in a sense, overview of the metabolism, and I hope that's going to help you. Thank you.